The restaurant lights were too bright for someone who already felt exposed, and the empty chair across from her felt heavier than 1,000 stairs. Outside, the city moved on without noticing her trembling hands or the way hope was quietly slipping through her fingers. This was supposed to be a new beginning, a harmless blind date, a chance at something better. Instead, she sat alone, fighting the urge to stand up and disappear, whispering to herself that maybe she had expected too much from life once again. If you believe that kindness can change lives, that second chances are real, and that sometimes the smallest moments matter the most, please take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that need them. She had arrived early, as she always did. Being punctual was her quiet way of showing respect, of proving that she was worth showing up for. The restaurant staff had smiled politely at first, then began avoiding her table as minutes passed. She checked her phone again and again, refreshing messages that never came. Each passing second felt like a reminder of every time she had been overlooked, passed over, or forgotten. Her blind date had been set up by a well-meaning coworker who insisted that this man was different, stable, successful, kind. She had believed it, not because she was naive, but because she desperately wanted to. Her name was Lena, and life had never unfolded the way she imagined. She grew up learning to be strong because no one else would be strong for her. She worked hard, kept her head down, and carried invisible scars from relationships that taught her how easily people could leave. Trust, for her, was never freely given. It was something she guarded closely, the way someone protects the last fragile thing they own. Sitting alone in that restaurant, she felt foolish for letting her guard down even a little. What Lena didn't know was that traffic had completely stopped several blocks away, trapping a man who had rearranged his entire evening just to be there. His name was Daniel, and although the world knew him as a CEO whose decisions moved millions, his real life was far quieter and heavier. He was a single father first, a man who measured success not by profit margins, but by whether his daughter smiled at the end of the day. Tonight was rare for him. He had almost canceled. Guilt tugged at him every time he left his daughter with a babysitter, even for a few hours. But something about this blind date felt different, as if it were asking him to step back into a part of himself he had buried for years. When Daniel finally arrived, breathless and apologetic, the restaurant had nearly emptied. He scanned the room, panic rising in his chest as he feared he was too late. Then he saw her. Lena sat stiffly at a small table near the window, hands clasped tightly together, eyes fixed on nothing. There was a quiet sadness about her that stopped him in his tracks. He didn't see judgment or anger when she looked up. He saw exhaustion, and something fragile that mirrored his own. Lena almost stood to leave when she noticed him approaching. Her instinct was to protect herself, to avoid another disappointment. But something in the way he slowed down, as if unsure whether he still deserved to sit across from her, made her pause. He didn't rush. He didn't offer excuses meant to impress. He simply showed up, fully present, carrying the weight of his lateness with sincerity. As they sat together, the awkwardness lingered like a fog. Neither of them knew where to begin. They talked about simple things at first, about workdays that never seemed to end, about favorite meals they rarely had time to cook. Slowly, the tension eased. Lena found herself laughing softly, surprised at how natural it felt. Daniel listened in a way she wasn't used to, as if her words mattered not because he was being polite, but because he genuinely wanted to understand her. What Lena didn't expect was the honesty that followed. Daniel spoke about being a single father, about the quiet house after bedtime, about the fear of failing the one person who depended on him completely. He didn't talk like a CEO. He talked like a man who had loved deeply and lost painfully, who had learned that success meant nothing if it cost him his humanity. Lena felt something shift inside her chest, a familiar ache mixed with a fragile hope. As the evening went on, the restaurant staff began stacking chairs and dimming lights. It was closing time, but neither of them noticed until a waiter gently reminded them. Lena felt panic rise again. Moments like this never lasted. She gathered her things quickly, already preparing herself for the polite goodbye, for the familiar silence that would follow. But as she stood, her knees weakened unexpectedly, the weight of the day and her emotions catching up to her. Without thinking, Daniel reached out and held her hand, steadying her. The gesture was simple, almost instinctive, but it carried something deeper. Lena froze, overwhelmed by the warmth of human connection she hadn't realized she needed so badly. Her eyes filled with tears she hadn't planned to shed. She didn't want to be dramatic, she didn't want to seem needy, but the words slipped out anyway, raw and unguarded, begging him not to leave because he was the only one who had shown up for her that night. Daniel didn't pull away. He didn't look uncomfortable or embarrassed. He stayed right there, holding her hand as if it were the most natural thing in the world. In that moment, he saw past the composed exterior she tried so hard to maintain. He saw loneliness that mirrored his own, a longing for reassurance that life hadn't forgotten her. He understood that her plea wasn't about him specifically. It was about every empty chair she had faced before. They sat back down, not because they had to, but because neither of them was ready to let the moment end. Outside, the city lights flickered, and the noise felt distant, irrelevant. They talked about fear, about disappointment, about how exhausting it was to keep believing when life kept testing them. Lena admitted how hard it was to feel invisible, to feel like she was always the one waiting. Daniel confessed how lonely leadership could be, how being surrounded by people didn't mean being understood. Something changed that night, not dramatically, not like in fairy tales, but quietly and deeply. There was no promise of forever, no grand declaration. There was simply two people choosing, in that moment, not to walk away. For Daniel, it was a reminder that vulnerability wasn't weakness. For Lena, it was proof that kindness could still find her, even when she least expected it. In the weeks that followed, life didn't suddenly become perfect. Daniel still juggled board meetings and bedtime stories. Lena still faced long workdays and quiet evenings. But they stayed in touch. They showed up for coffee, for walks, for conversations that mattered. Daniel introduced Lena to his daughter slowly, carefully, terrified of making mistakes but hopeful in a way he hadn't felt in years. Lena learned what it meant to be seen, not as an afterthought, but as someone worth planning for. There were challenges, misunderstandings, moments when old fears resurfaced. Lena struggled with trusting that Daniel wouldn't leave when things became inconvenient. Daniel wrestled with balancing his responsibilities and his growing feelings. But instead of running, they talked. Instead of assuming, they listened. Each small effort became a brick in something stable, something real. Months later, Lena would think back to that night in the nearly empty restaurant and marvel at how close she had come to walking away. She realized that sometimes the bravest thing wasn't staying strong, but allowing yourself to be held when you felt like breaking. Daniel, too, often reflected on how that blind date reminded him why he kept his heart open despite the risks. Because one moment of connection could change the direction of an entire life. If this story has touched your heart, if it reminded you of your own moments of waiting, hoping, or almost giving up, please take a moment now to like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement helps keep stories like this alive. Before the ending, we have a special request for you. Please comment below and tell us this. Do you believe showing up for someone, even once, can change a life? Your words might inspire someone who feels alone right now. Lena and Daniel never claimed their story was extraordinary, but in a world where people often leave without explanation, where chairs remain empty and hopes quietly fade, their choice to stay became everything. And sometimes, that is all it takes.